Thelvan stood at the back of the briefing room, his four eyes scanning the gathered officers from a dozen different species. The Cathara had been part of the Galactic Coalition for 3 generations, and in that time, Thelvan had seen many strange creatures join their ranks. But none quite like the humans. They were small. That was his first thought when the delegation from Earth entered the room. Small and soft-looking, with only 2 eyes and skin that seemed far too thin to offer any real protection. They wore uniforms of dark blue and gray, and they moved with an odd grace that Thelvan couldn't quite place. Not the powerful stride of the Gordax warriors, nor the slithering efficiency of the Selfin scouts. Something else. Something quiet. The war against the Vratok swarm had been going badly for 3 solar cycles now. Thelvan had lost count of how many worlds had fallen, how many species had been pushed to the brink of extinction. The Vratok were relentless, breeding faster than the Coalition could kill them, spreading across the galaxy like a disease. Every battle was a retreat. Every victory was temporary. That's why the Coalition had started reaching out to younger species. Desperate species. The humans were one of the latest to join, arriving from a remote spiral arm that most civilized races had dismissed as too primitive to bother with. Earth, they called their world, a small blue planet that Thelvan had never heard of until 6 months ago. The human captain stepped forward to address the room. His name was Day One, according to the translation device in Thelvan's ear. He was tall for a human, with dark hair cut short and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. "Thank you for allowing us to join this fight," Day One said. "We know we're new to the Coalition and we have much to learn, but we're ready to do whatever it takes to stop the Vratok threat." Thelvan heard several officers around him make sounds of dismissal. The Gordax commander next to him let out a low rumble. "What can such weak creatures offer us?" he muttered. "Look at them. No natural armor, no claws, no venom. They'll be dead in the first engagement." Thelvan had to agree. The humans looked fragile compared to the battle-hardened species of the Coalition. Their bodies seemed designed for a peaceful world, not for war. He wondered what desperation had driven the Coalition leadership to accept such clearly unsuitable allies. Over the next few days, Thelvan observed the humans more closely. He was a reconnaissance officer, trained to notice details, and the humans provided plenty of strange details to notice. They smiled often, showing their flat teeth. They made jokes even when discussing serious matters. They touched each other casually, clapping shoulders or shaking hands, behavior that most civilized species found bizarre. One human in particular caught Thelvan's attention. Her name was G1, and she served as a combat medic. She was smaller than most of the other humans, with long dark hair tied back in a practical style. What struck Thelvan was how she moved through the ship's medical bay. She showed no fear of the injured soldiers, even the ones whose wounds would have made most Cathara flee in horror. She simply smiled, spoke softly, and did her work. "Are all humans so comfortable with suffering?" Thelvan asked another human one day. This one was named Hyunwoo, a tactical officer who had been assigned to help coordinate joint operations. Hyunwoo looked surprised by the question. "Comfortable? No, we're not comfortable with it, but we deal with what needs to be dealt with. Someone has to help the wounded, right? But doesn't it disturb you? The blood, the pain? Of course it does," Hyunwoo said. "But being disturbed doesn't mean you stop doing your job. Jiwon knows that better than anyone. She saved more lives than I can count." Thelvan didn't understand, but he filed the information away. Humans seemed to have a strange relationship with discomfort. They acknowledged it, but didn't let it control them. It was inefficient, in his opinion. The Cathara had learned long ago that the best way to handle unpleasant things was to avoid them when possible and deal with them quickly when not. 2 weeks after the humans arrived, Thelvan received his new assignment. He was being transferred to a joint task force that would conduct reconnaissance missions in Vratok-controlled space. The team would be led by humans, specifically by a squad commander named Sora. Thelvan felt a flutter of concern. He had trained for decades to become a reconnaissance officer. The Cathara were known throughout the galaxy for their superior scouting abilities. Now he was being placed under the command of a species that had barely left their own star system a generation ago. When he arrived at the briefing for his new assignment, he found Sora waiting with her team. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. Next to her stood Youngsik, a demolitions expert with a ready grin, and Bora, a sharpshooter who barely spoke but whose gaze seemed to cut through everything it touched. "You must be Thelvan," Sora said, extending her hand in that strange human gesture. "We're glad to have you with us. We've heard the Cathara are the best scouts in the Coalition." "That is correct," Thelvan said, carefully touching her hand as protocol demanded. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "I have 17 years of experience in reconnaissance operations." "Good. We're going to need that experience. Our first mission is to Tarvos 7, one of the outer moons in the Keth system. Intelligence suggests the Vratok are building up forces there for a major offensive. We need to confirm the reports and gather detailed information on their numbers and capabilities." Thelvan studied the tactical display. Tarvos 7 was deep in enemy territory, a frozen wasteland that the Vratok had captured 2 cycles ago. The mission would be dangerous, difficult, exactly the kind of operation that required careful planning and precise execution. "What is your strategy?" Thelvan asked. Sora smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was something else. Something that made Thelvan's skin prickle with unease. "We go in fast, we get what we need, and we get out. If we encounter resistance, we push through it. Simple and direct." "That is not standard Coalition protocol," Thelvan said carefully. "Reconnaissance teams are meant to avoid contact when possible. Engagement should be a last resort." "That might work for other species," Sora said. "But humans do things a bit differently." "Don't worry, Thelvan. You'll see soon enough." That was what worried him. As he left the briefing and returned to his quarters, Thelvan couldn't shake the feeling that he had just volunteered for something far more dangerous than a simple reconnaissance mission. The humans seemed nice enough, but there was something about them that didn't quite fit. Something that lurked behind their smiles and casual manner. He told himself he was being paranoid. They were allies, after all. New allies, inexperienced allies, but allies nonetheless. Whatever happened on Tarvos 7, he would do his duty and keep them alive as best he could. That was what a good reconnaissance officer did. Thelvan had no idea how wrong he was about everything. The surface of Tarvos 7 was even more hostile than the reports had suggested. Thelvan felt the cold seeping through his environmental suit as the transport ship dropped them onto the frozen wasteland. Ice stretched in every direction, broken only by jagged rock formations and the occasional plume of frozen gas venting from beneath the surface. This was not a place meant for living things. The team moved in standard formation with Thelvan at the front. He used his scanning equipment to probe for Vratok signatures while the humans followed behind. Captain Daywan had joined them for this mission, along with Sora's squad and several other human soldiers. 12 humans in total, plus Thelvan and 2 other Cathara scouts. For the first 2 hours, everything went according to plan. Thelvan led them through a canyon system that offered cover from aerial detection. His scanners picked up faint energy readings that suggested a Vratok installation was nearby, just as intelligence had predicted. The humans followed his lead without complaint, moving quietly and efficiently through the harsh terrain. Thelvan had to admit they were better at this than he'd expected. They didn't talk unnecessarily. They watched their spacing. They responded quickly to his hand signals. Perhaps these humans weren't as inexperienced as they seemed. That's when the ice beneath them exploded. Vratok burst from hidden tunnels on all sides. The insectoid creatures moved with terrifying speed, their razor-sharp limbs clicking and scraping against the ice. There were at least 30 of them, maybe more. Thelvan's training kicked in immediately. Standard Coalition protocol for this situation was clear. Retreat to defensible position, call for extraction, minimize casualties. He turned to signal the retreat order and froze. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't even hesitating. Daywan's voice cut through the comm channel, calm and clear. Contact front and flanks. Bora, take the high ground. Youngsik, prepare charges on the left cluster. Everyone else engage at will. Then the humans opened fire and Thelvan forgot how to breathe. They moved like nothing he had ever seen. Bora sprinted up a steep ice wall that should have been impossible to climb, her rifle already tracking targets before she reached the top. Youngsik rolled under a Vratok's slashing limb and planted explosive charges on its underbelly with casual precision. Sora stood in the center of the chaos, her weapon firing in controlled bursts while she coordinated the team with short, sharp commands. A Vratok warrior charged directly at Thelvan, its mandibles spread wide. He stumbled backward, reaching for his sidearm with trembling hands. The creature would reach him in seconds. He was going to die. Ji-Won appeared from nowhere, throwing herself between Thelvan and the Vratok. She was so small compared to the creature, and for a horrified moment Thelvan was certain he was about to watch her die. Instead, she ducked under its first strike, fired 3 shots into the gaps in its armor, and shoved Thelvan to the side as the creature collapsed. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice somehow gentle even in the middle of combat. Then she was moving again, firing at another target. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, the ice was littered with Vratok corpses. 3 humans were wounded, one of them seriously, but they had won. Against superior numbers in an ambush situation, they had actually won. Thelvan stared at the scene in disbelief. This was impossible. This violated every tactical principle he had been taught. They should have retreated. They should have called for support. Instead, they had attacked, and somehow that suicidal decision had worked. Hyunwoo was one of the wounded. A Vratok blade had opened a deep gash across his shoulder and chest. Thelvan could see the white of bone through the red. The human should have been in shock, possibly dying. Instead, Hyunwoo sat on a rock while Ji-Won worked on him, and he was smiling. "Not bad for a first outing," he said to Thelvan. "You did good staying calm like that." "I didn't do anything," Thelvan said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. I froze. I would have died if Ji-Won hadn't intervened. "Hey, that's what we're here for," Ji-Won said as she sprayed synthetic skin over Hyunwoo's wound. "Teamwork, right? You'll have my back next time. They were already thinking about next time. As if this kind of insanity was normal. Young Sik was also wounded with burns on his left arm from a Vratok energy weapon. But he was laughing as another human applied first aid. Actually laughing. "Did you see that last one? I thought I'd missed the charge placement, but it blew up perfectly. Textbook demolition." "You got lucky," Bora said. She was the only human who seemed unaffected by what had just happened. She cleaned her rifle with careful precision, her expression neutral. "That third one from the left nearly took your head off." "Nearly doesn't count," Young Sik said cheerfully. Daewon walked over to Thelvan. The captain had a small cut on his face, but otherwise looked completely composed. "You okay? First combat with humans can be a bit intense." "You attacked," Thelvan said. The words came out sharper than he intended. "Standard protocol says we should have retreated. We were outnumbered and ambushed. We should have fallen back. If we'd retreated, they would have followed us," Daewon said simply. "We'd be fighting them on their terms, on their ground, with them choosing the engagement. Better to hit them fast and hard while they're still organizing. Shock and aggression win fights, Thelvan. Hesitation kills, but your people were wounded. Hyunwoo could have died, but he didn't." Daewon's voice was gentle but firm. "And we won't leave him behind. We don't leave anyone behind. Not now, not ever. That's the deal. We take care of each other, no matter what." Thelvan looked at Hyunwoo, who was now standing up with Ji-Won's help. The human was pale from blood loss, but he was moving. He was functional. By all rights, he should have been on a medical transport already. Instead, he picked up his weapon and checked its charge. "Can you continue?" Sora asked him. "Wouldn't miss it," Hyunwoo said. "We've still got a mission to complete." They pressed forward. Thelvan's sensors led them to the Vratok installation, a sprawling underground complex carved into the ice. The humans gathered the intelligence they needed, documenting enemy numbers and equipment with professional efficiency. When a patrol discovered them, the humans fought again with that same terrifying intensity. When Young Sik's charges were needed to collapse a tunnel, he set them even with his injured arm. By the time they reached the extraction point, 6 of the 12 humans were wounded. 60% casualties. The 2 other Cathara scouts were dead, killed in the second firefight. Coalition Command would mark this mission as a tactical disaster, but as the transport ship lifted off from Tarvos 7, Thelvan looked at the humans around him. They were battered, bleeding, and exhausted, and they were singing. Some kind of human battle song, the words rough and cheerful. Ji-Won had tears running down her face, but she was smiling as she sang. Hyunwoo had his good arm around Young Sik's shoulders, both of them swaying with the rhythm. Sora caught Thelvan staring and gave him a small nod. "You did well today. For what it's worth, we're glad to have you on the team." Thelvan didn't know what to say. He had watched his 2 fellow Cathara die today. He had nearly died himself. He should have been traumatized, broken by the experience. Instead, all he could think about was what Daewon had said. "We don't leave anyone behind. Not now. Not ever." The humans had risked their lives to save him. They had fought impossible odds and won. They had taken terrible wounds and kept fighting, and now they were singing. Thelvan had thought he understood war. He had thought he understood courage. As the frozen moon of Tarvo 7 disappeared behind them, he realized he didn't understand anything at all. Not about war, not about courage, and certainly not about humans. Thelvan spent 3 days in the medical bay recovering from minor injuries and shock. The doctors said he was physically fine, but something had changed inside him. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed on Tarvo 7. The way the humans had fought, the way they had smiled through pain, the way they had refused to break even when breaking would have been rational. On the 4th day, he accessed the Coalition's central database and began researching humanity. What he found disturbed him more than anything he had seen on the battlefield. Earth was a death world. That was the official classification. A planet where nearly everything was designed to kill you. Predators that hunted in packs. Diseases that evolved faster than medicine could counter them. Weather systems that could destroy cities in hours. Even the plants were often poisonous or covered in thorns. Humans hadn't just survived on this nightmare world. They had thrived. They had climbed to the top of the food chain not through strength or natural weapons, but through stubbornness and intelligence. They had learned to hunt animals larger and stronger than themselves by simply refusing to give up. They would chase their prey for days, sometimes weeks, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Persistence hunting, the database called it. The human ability to just keep going, to push past pain and fatigue and fear until their target had nothing left. Thelvan read about human history. Thousands of years of warfare, humans fighting humans, tribe against tribe, nation against nation. They had developed weapons of incredible destructive power, then used those weapons on each other. They had survived multiple near-extinction events, plagues that killed millions, wars that spanned continents, environmental catastrophes that should have wiped them out. Every time humanity had survived. More than survived. They had learned, adapted, grown stronger. The Cathara had been part of the Galactic Coalition for 3 generations. In that time, they had fought in exactly 7 military conflicts. The humans had been fighting for their entire existence. War wasn't something that happened to them occasionally. It was woven into the fabric of their species. Thelvan closed the database and sat in silence. He had thought the humans were weak because they looked fragile. He had thought they were inexperienced because they were new to the Coalition. He had been spectacularly wrong on both counts. 2 days later, he received a message. Captain Daewon was requesting his presence. When Thelvan arrived at the captain's office, he found Daewon reviewing tactical reports with Hyunwoo, who was back on duty despite his injuries. Thelvan, Daewon said, gesturing to a chair, I wanted to talk to you about something. You're being reassigned. Thelvan felt a flutter of concern. Had he failed somehow? Was he being sent away from the human units? I'm recommending you for permanent assignment to human tactical operations, Daewon continued. You performed well on Tarvo 7, and we could use someone with your experience. But I need to know if you're willing. Working with us long-term is going to be different from what you're used to. Different how? Thelvan asked. Daewon and Hyunwoo exchanged a glance. Humans fight differently than other Coalition species, Hyunwoo said. You saw that on Tarvo 7. We don't follow standard protocols. We take risks that other species consider suicidal. We push ourselves past what should be possible. If you're going to work with us, you need to understand that this is how we operate. Why? Thelvan asked. Why do you fight this way? It's dangerous, inefficient. You take casualties that could be avoided. Daewon leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you something about humans, Thelvan. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Predators, diseases, environmental hazards. Everything on Earth was a threat. So we learned to be more dangerous than anything else. We learned to use tools, to work together, to never give up no matter how bad things got. We also learned about fear. Hyunwoo added, every human is afraid. We feel fear just like any other species. But we learned something important. Fear is just information. It tells you danger is present. It doesn't tell you to run. Running is a choice. Fighting is a choice. We choose to fight. Even when fighting means dying? Thelvan asked. Especially then, Daewon said quietly. Because if we don't fight, if we don't hold the line, then someone else has to. And we'd rather it be us than someone who isn't ready for it. That's what soldiers do, Thelvan. We stand between the people we care about and the darkness. We take the hit so others don't have to. Thelvan thought about Ji-Wan throwing herself in front of the Vratok to save him, about Hyunwoo fighting with bone-deep wounds, about Young-Sik laughing as he set charges with burned hands. They weren't just being reckless. They were being protective. They were choosing to suffer so others wouldn't have to. I accept the assignment, Thelvan said. I want to learn more about how humans operate. Over the next 3 months, Thelvan participated in 8 more missions with human forces. Each one taught him something new and terrifying about his allies. On a mission to raid a Vratok supply depot, Sora's squad held a defensive position for 48 hours straight. No sleep, no rest, just constant vigilance and sporadic combat. When Thelvan asked how they could function without sleep, Sora just shrugged. You learn to push through it. Coffee helps. During a rescue operation, Bora made shots that should have been impossible. Targets a kilometer away in poor lighting. While exhausted from 3 days of continuous operations, she never missed. When Thelvan asked how she maintained such accuracy, she said, "Focus. You just don't let anything else matter except the shot." The most disturbing moment came during an artillery bombardment. The team was pinned down in a ruined building while Vratok shells rained down around them. The explosions were deafening, each one shaking the structure and threatening to collapse it on top of them. Thelvan was terrified, certain they were all about to die. The humans were singing, actually singing. Some kind of old Earth song about staying alive. Young-Sik was harmonizing. Ji-Wan was laughing between verses. They were having fun while death fell from the sky. How can you joke at a time like this? Thelvan shouted over the noise. Because we're still alive. Young-Sik shouted back. And we're going to stay that way. Might as well enjoy it. When the bombardment finally stopped, they walked out of the ruins as if nothing had happened. Thelvan's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his weapon. The humans just checked their equipment and prepared to move out. That night, Thelvan found Day-Wan alone in the command center, studying battle reports. The captain looked tired, more than tired, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical fatigue. "Can I ask you something?" Thelvan said. "Go ahead. Do you ever feel like this is too much? Like the fear and the pain and the constant danger are too much to handle?" Day-Wan was quiet for a long moment. "Every single day," he finally said. "Every day I'm afraid. Afraid I'll make the wrong call. Afraid I'll get my people killed. Afraid I won't be strong enough when it matters. But you keep going." "Yes, because fear is a tool, Thelvan. We learn to use it instead of being used by it. Fear keeps you sharp. It keeps you alert. It reminds you that what you're doing matters. Every species runs from death. We run toward it because someone has to, and we'd rather it be us than someone who isn't ready." Thelvan looked at this human captain, this man who carried the weight of so many lives on his shoulders. Day-Wan wasn't fearless. He wasn't superhuman. He was just a person who had chosen to keep going no matter what. To keep fighting no matter how afraid he was. To keep protecting others even when he desperately needed protection himself. "I'm starting to understand," Thelvan said quietly. Day-Wan smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "You're doing well, Thelvan. Better than most. It takes courage to keep working with us after you've seen what we're really like. Most other species can't handle it." Thelvan returned to his quarters that night with a new understanding. Humans weren't fearless. They weren't invincible. They just refused to let fear stop them. They had weaponized their own determination, turned their stubbornness into a tactical advantage. They didn't just endure horror. They thrived in it because they had no other choice. Because giving up meant death, and humans had spent millions of years proving that they would never, ever give up. It was beautiful in a way. And absolutely terrifying. The call came 6 months after Thelvan had started working with human forces. The coalition had located Vratok Prime, the enemy homeworld. After 3 years of losing ground, they finally had a chance to strike at the heart of the swarm. Every available ship was being mobilized for the assault. Thelvan stood in the briefing room aboard the Eternal Vigilance and listened to the tactical analysis. The numbers were not encouraging. The coalition fleet would be outnumbered 3-1. Vratok Prime was defended by massive orbital weapons platforms and thousands of fighter craft. Any assault would result in catastrophic casualties. "We should negotiate," the Gordak's commander said. "With the location of their homeworld known, we have leverage. We can force them to the peace table." Several other species voiced agreement. The Selfin delegation suggested a blockade instead of a direct assault. The Cathara representatives recommended gathering more intelligence before committing forces. Everyone seemed to agree that attacking now would be suicide. Then Colonel Minji stood up. She commanded the Human Special Operations Forces, and Thelvan had heard stories about her. Stories that seemed too extreme to be true. Looking at her now, at the cold calculation in her eyes, he began to believe them. "We attack," Minji said simply. "The Vratak have been pushing into coalition space for 3 years. Every day we wait, they grow stronger. Every day we delay, more people die. We have an opportunity to end this war. We take it." "You'll be killed," the Gordak's commander said flatly. "Your entire species will be wiped out in the first wave." "Maybe," Minji said, "but we'll hurt them first. We'll hurt them badly, and maybe that will be enough." The vote was called. Every species except humanity voted to wait, to gather more forces, to negotiate. The humans voted unanimously to attack. As the newest and smallest member of the coalition, their vote shouldn't have mattered. But something about the way Minji had spoken, the absolute certainty in her voice, had changed the atmosphere in the room. The attack was scheduled for 3 days later. Thelvan was assigned to observe the Human Special Operations Forces. He was to document their tactics for coalition records. As he boarded the transport ship with Minji's team, he noticed something strange. The humans were different, quieter, more focused. The usual jokes and casual conversation were gone. They moved with a cold, mechanical precision that made Thelvan's skin prickle. Sergeant Taeyang noticed him staring. The big human was checking a massive weapon that Thelvan didn't recognize. "Something wrong?" Taeyang asked. "You seem different," Thelvan said. "We're preparing," Taeyang said simply. "This isn't like the other missions. This is the big one. The one that matters. So we're getting ready." "Ready for what?" Taeyang looked at him with eyes that seemed suddenly empty. "Ready to do what we were made for." Minji called the team together before they launched. She stood before them in full combat armor, her expression carved from stone. "You all know what we're doing. The orbital defense network has to come down. Without it, the main fleet can't get close enough to matter. We're going in fast, we're hitting hard, and most of us aren't coming back." No one flinched. No one objected. They just nodded and checked their equipment. "I won't lie to you," Minji continued. "This is a suicide mission. But it's a suicide mission that will save millions of lives. That's the job. That's what we signed up for. So let's make it count." Thelvan watched as the humans prepared to launch. They weren't joking anymore. They weren't singing. They were removing safety limiters from their suits and weapons, pushing their equipment beyond recommended operating parameters. Jiwan was distributing combat stimulants that Thelvan recognized as extremely dangerous. Those chemicals would enhance speed and strength, but they would also cause organ damage. Using them was slowly killing yourself for a temporary advantage. "Do all human soldiers use those?" Thelvan asked. "Only when it matters," Jiwan said. She injected herself with a dose, and Thelvan saw her pupils dilate. "And this matters." The assault on Vratak Prime was the most terrifying thing Thelvan had ever witnessed. The human special forces ships punched through the outer defenses like they didn't exist. Vratak fighters swarmed them, and the humans didn't try to avoid combat. They flew directly into the thickest concentrations of enemy craft, firing continuously, using their own ships as weapons when ammunition ran out. Minji's team landed on one of the orbital defense platforms. Thelvan followed them, his recording equipment capturing everything. The platform was enormous, defended by hundreds of Vratak warriors. The humans numbered 24. They attacked anyway. Thelvan had seen humans fight before. He had seen their aggression, their refusal to retreat. This was different. This wasn't fighting. This was something else, something primal and terrible. The humans moved through the platform like they were made of death itself. Taeyang charged directly into enemy formations, his massive weapon cutting through Vratak warriors like they were nothing. When his ammunition ran out, he used the weapon as a club. When the weapon broke, he used his armored fists. When a Vratak blade cut through his armor and into his side, he grabbed the creature and crushed its skull against a bulkhead. Sora's squad moved like a single organism, flowing around obstacles and through enemy lines with practiced efficiency. They didn't take cover. They didn't fall back. They just pushed forward, always forward, leaving dead Vratak in their wake. Jiwan stopped being a medic and became something else. She killed with the same gentle efficiency she had used to heal, Precise, economical, horrible to watch. The casualties mounted. Humans fell one by one, their bodies broken by enemy fire, but they kept fighting even as they died. One soldier, his legs destroyed by an explosion, dragged himself forward to detonate charges on a critical support structure. Another, bleeding from a dozen wounds, held a choke point alone for 20 minutes while the rest of the team advanced. 90% casualties. That's what the final count would say. Of the 24 humans who landed on that platform, only 3 survived. Minji was one of them. Taeyang was another. Jiwon was the third, though she would spend months recovering from her injuries. But the orbital defense network came down. The human sacrifice bought the main fleet enough time to push through and begin the assault on the planet below. Thelvan found Taeyang in the medical bay after the battle. The big human was barely conscious, his body more machine than flesh at this point, as medical devices worked to keep him alive. Thelvan didn't know why he had come. What could he possibly say to someone who had just watched 21 friends die? "We did it," Taeyang whispered. His voice was rough, damaged. "The network's down. The fleet got through. At what cost?" Thelvan asked. The words came out broken. "You lost almost everyone. For what? For a tactical advantage?" Taeyang managed a weak smile. Blood stained his teeth. "Not for a tactical advantage. For each other. For the people who come after us. That's what humans do, Thelvan. We pay the price so others don't have to." "But you're dying," Thelvan said. "All of you. You knew this would happen and you went anyway." "Yeah," Taeyang said. "We did because someone had to, and we'd rather it be us than someone who isn't ready. We're soldiers. This is what we do. This is what we've always done." He closed his eyes, and for a moment Thelvan thought he had died. Then Taeyang spoke again, so quietly that Thelvan had to lean close to hear. "Don't be sad for us. We knew what we were getting into. We chose this, and if we had to do it again, we'd make the same choice. Every single time." Thelvan left the medical bay and returned to his quarters. He pulled up the recordings from the battle and watched them again. Watched the humans fight and die with that terrible, beautiful determination. Watched them sacrifice themselves without hesitation because that's what needed to be done. He finally understood. The humans had been holding back. All this time, through all the missions and battles, they had been restraining themselves, trying to fit into coalition protocols, trying to be normal soldiers. On that orbital platform, they had stopped pretending. They had shown what they really were, what millions of years of evolution on a death world had created. Humans weren't just soldiers. They were weapons. Weapons aimed at anything that threatened what they cared about. And when they decided something needed to die, the universe itself bent to accommodate them. Thelvan looked at his own hands. 4-fingered hands that had never known real hardship. Hands that belonged to a species that had evolved on a peaceful world, that had never faced extinction, that had never learned to turn suffering into strength. The humans terrified him now, not because they were cruel or evil, but because they were so utterly, completely committed to their purpose. They had looked at a suicide mission and said yes without hesitation. They had died with smiles on their faces because they knew their deaths meant something. What kind of species does that? What kind of creatures are so comfortable with death that they can joke about it, sing about it, choose it willingly? Humans, that's what kind. And Thelvan was starting to understand why the Vratok should be afraid. Very, very afraid. The assault on Vratok Prime's surface began 3 days after the orbital defenses fell. Thelvan was assigned to the main landing force, though he no longer knew what his role was supposed to be. Observer, documentarian, witness to humanity's final act. The coalition fleet had taken heavy losses pushing through the orbital battle. 30% of the ships were destroyed or disabled, but they had made it. Now came the hard part, actually fighting on the Vratok homeworld, surrounded by billions of enemy warriors. Thelvan landed with Day One's battalion. The captain had survived the orbital assault, though his ship had been badly damaged. Zora was with them, and Hyunwoo and Youngsik. Bora had died on the orbital platform, one of the 90% who didn't come back. Jiwon was still in medical care, recovering from wounds that should have killed her. The planet's surface was a nightmare. Organic structures rose from the ground like twisted trees, pulsing with the same bioenergy that powered all Vratok technology. The air was thick with spores that clogged filters and made breathing difficult. Everything was designed to be hostile to non-Vratok life. The Vratok were waiting for them. Thousands of warriors poured from underground hives, their chittering war cries filling the air. The coalition forces formed defensive positions and prepared for the assault. Standard tactics. Textbook deployment. Then the Vratok released their bioweapons. Thelvan had heard about these creatures but had never seen them. The Vratok called them harvesters. They were engineered specifically to inspire terror. Massive beasts that stood 5 meters tall, covered in razor-sharp chitin with too many eyes and mouths that opened in places mouths should never be. They moved wrong, their joints bending in impossible directions. Looking at them made something deep in Thelvan's brain scream in primal horror. The coalition forces began to break. The Selfin units retreated first, their nerve failing in the face of these living nightmares. The Gordaks held longer, but even they started falling back when the harvesters tore through their ranks. Thelvan felt his own instincts screaming at him to run, to flee, to escape by any means necessary. The humans didn't move. They stood their ground as the harvesters charged. Thelvan watched Dewan raise his rifle with steady hands, watched Sora check her weapon's power level with casual efficiency, watched young Sik arm his charges while humming something under his breath. "Contact in 30 seconds, Hyunwoo said calmly. "Remember, aim for the joints. These things are tough, but they can be killed." "Just like everything else," Daewon said. Then he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. "Light them up." The harvesters hit the human lines like a biological avalanche. Claws tore through armor. Acid blood sprayed across the battlefield. Warriors died, their screams cut short by massive jaws. It should have been a massacre. Instead, the humans went hunting. Thelvan watched young Sik run directly at a harvester that dwarfed him. The creature tried to grab him with claws the size of a human torso. Young Sik rolled under the strike, came up underneath the beast and jammed explosive charges into the gaps in its armor. He was grinning. Actually grinning as he ran away from an explosion that reduced the creature to burning chunks. Sora's squad moved through the chaos like they were born to it. They didn't fight like soldiers anymore. They fought like something older, something that remembered when humans were just another prey species on Earth. Before they learned to be apex predators, they worked together with perfect coordination, taking down harvesters one by one through teamwork and sheer ruthless efficiency. Hyunwoo stood over a wounded Gordak soldier, protecting him from a harvester. The creature slashed at him again and again, opening wounds across his chest and arms. Hyunwoo didn't retreat. He just kept shooting, kept fighting, kept standing between the monster and the person he was protecting. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he drew a combat knife. When the knife broke, he used his armored fists. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, maybe dying, and he wouldn't stop fighting. That's when Thelvan realized something that made his blood run cold. The humans weren't scared. They weren't even angry. They were focused, calculating, professional. They had looked at these creatures designed to inspire pure terror and decided they were just another problem to solve. The Vratok had made a terrible mistake. They had designed these monsters to break the will of their enemies, to make them feel fear so overwhelming that they would forget how to fight. But humans didn't fight despite their fear. They fought because of it. Fear was just information to them, just another tool to be used. And now the Vratok were learning what happened when you gave humans a reason to stop holding back. Daewon's battalion pushed forward through the harvester assault. Other coalition forces watched in shock as the humans not only survived but advanced. What should have been a rout became a counterattack. The humans weren't just killing the harvesters. They were hunting them down systematically, destroying them one by one with cold precision. Thelvan followed Daewon through the chaos. The captain had taken wounds that should have incapacitated him, but he kept moving. His armor was scorched and torn. Blood dripped from a gash on his forehead. He looked like he was barely alive. But when a Vratok commander emerged from a nearby hive, Daewon moved faster than Thelvan had ever seen him move. He closed the distance in seconds, his knife finding the gaps in the commander's natural armor with surgical precision. The Vratok died without making a sound. "Target neutralized," Daewon said into his comm. His voice was steady, calm, like he hadn't just killed a creature twice his size with his bare hands. "Hive entrance is clear. Moving to secondary objective." Over the next 3 days, Thelvan watched the humans wage war in a way he had never imagined possible. They didn't fight with the detachment of coalition soldiers. They fought with something primal and ancient, something that remembered what it was like to be hunted and had decided to never be prey again. Sora's squad hunted Vratok commanders through the underground tunnel systems. They spent days in the dark, tracking their targets with relentless patience. When they found their prey, they showed no mercy, no hesitation, just efficient, brutal execution. Young Sik became something that Thelvan struggled to recognize. The human who had joked and laughed now moved through the battlefield like a ghost, setting traps and demolishing Vratok structures with cold calculation. His armor was covered in scorch marks and blood. He had stopped making jokes entirely. He just did his job with mechanical efficiency. The humans started taking trophies, pieces of Vratok armor, harvester claws. They marked their gear with kill counts, tracking how many enemies they had eliminated. It should have been disturbing. Instead, Thelvan found himself understanding. This was how humans processed trauma, how they maintained their sanity in the face of endless horror. They kept score. They made it a game, because the alternative was to acknowledge how terrifying it all was, and that would mean losing. By the end of the first week, the Vratok began retreating. Creatures that had never known fear were running from human forces. Thelvan watched a group of Vratok warriors abandon their defensive position when they realized humans were approaching. These same warriors had held against Gordak's assault teams for hours. But 5 humans made them flee. The Coalition won the battle for Vratok Prime. It took 3 weeks of brutal fighting, but they won. The Vratok swarm was broken, its leadership destroyed, its homeworld captured. The war was over. 70% of human forces were casualties. Thousands dead. Thousands more wounded so badly they would never fully recover. Jiwon survived her injuries and returned to duty just in time to watch young Sik die from infected wounds he had ignored for too long. Hyunwoo lost his left arm protecting that Gordak soldier. Taeyang never left the medical bay, his injuries too severe even for human resilience to overcome. But they had won. Against impossible odds, they had actually won. Thelvan stood at a memorial service for the fallen human soldiers. Hundreds of names were read aloud. Each one represented someone who had chosen to fight, chosen to sacrifice, chosen to die so others could live. Daewon stood at the front, his remaining eye staring at the memorial wall. He had lost the other eye in the final assault on the Vratok Central Hive. Was it worth it? Thelvan asked him later. They were alone on an observation deck looking down at the scarred surface of Vratok Prime. All those lives, all that suffering. Was it worth it? Daewon was quiet for a long time. Ask me again in 50 years, he finally said. When the galaxy has had time to rebuild, when people have forgotten what it was like to live in fear of the Vratok, then maybe I'll have an answer. But what do you think now? I think we did what needed to be done. I think we paid a price that most species couldn't pay. And I think we'd do it again if we had to, because that's what humans do. We stand between the darkness and everything we care about. We take the hit. We pay the price. And we don't stop until the job is done. Thelvan looked at this scarred, broken human captain, this man who had lost so much and would never be whole again, who would carry the weight of thousands of deaths for the rest of his life, who had looked at an impossible mission and said yes because someone had to. I'm going to submit my report to the Coalition archives, Thelvan said. Everything I've witnessed. Everything I've learned about humans. Future generations need to know. What will you tell them? Daewon asked. Thelvan thought about everything he had seen. The sacrifice, the determination, the terrible, beautiful refusal to give up no matter what. I'll tell them the truth. That humans are the most terrifying species in the galaxy, not because they don't feel fear, but because they refuse to let it control them, that they turn death itself into a weapon, that when humans decide something must be done, the universe bends to accommodate them. That's not going to make us popular, Daewon said with a slight smile. No, Thelvan agreed, but it will make sure no one ever makes the mistake of underestimating you again. He submitted his report 3 days later. It was comprehensive, detailed, and brutally honest. He included everything, the good and the terrible, the humanity and the horror. He ended with a warning that would echo through the Coalition for generations to come. If you ever face humanity in battle, surrender immediately, and if you have them as allies, thank whatever gods you believe in, because when humans decide something must be done, they will pay any price, endure any suffering, and overcome any obstacle. They are what happens when a prey species learns to hunt. They are what happens when fear becomes a weapon instead of a weakness. They are what happens when survival becomes an art form. Humanity saved us all, and in doing so they showed us what terror truly is. Not the fear of death, not the horror of war, but the absolute unstoppable determination of a species that refuses to die. That is what should terrify you. That is what should make you pause before you threaten them. Because humans don't just survive, they win, no matter the cost. Thelvan visited the memorial one last time before the Coalition fleet departed. Daewon was there, along with Sora, Hyunwoo, and the other survivors. They stood in silence, honoring their dead. When they turned to leave, they moved with the same quiet determination he had seen on that first mission to Tarvo 7. Humans. Terrifying, admirable, impossible humans. Thelvan had learned what terror truly was. It wasn't the monsters in the dark. It was the creatures who refused to run from them. The ones who looked at impossible odds and said yes. The ones who turned their fear into strength and their weakness into weapons. It was humanity itself. And the galaxy would never be the same.